Hello and welcome again to another edition of the CAI Report. I'm Mike Livingston, the current president of the Coachella Valley chapter of CAI, which is a national organization of Community Associations Institute. It's an educational organization for homeowners, board members, vendors of community associations, common interest developments, condominiums, planned unit developments. Jen Wangler with the firm of Fiore, Racobs & Powers is our guest today, and she's an attorney here in the Coachella Valley, and she's going to be talking with us about boards of directors and their roles in community associations. Jen, thanks for joining us today.
You're most welcome.
Jen is also a member of our current board of directors here, and she's well known throughout the valley here and up and down the California coast, and we're glad that we got the opportunity to get some time with her here. Jen, a lot of times when people live in common interest developments and condominium complexes and planned unit developments, they don't really realize sometimes when they move into these gated communities that, in fact, they're moving into a business, aren't they?
They are. They take subject to the CC&Rs, which governs how the property is going to be managed and maintained. They're also becoming a member of a corporation. An association is also a California corporation, nonprofit corporation, and that corporation is governed by a board of directors, usually a 5-member or 7-member board of directors comprised of members of the association that are elected by the members. Mm-hmm. And that board of directors makes the vast majority of the decisions, conducts all the business of that corporation for the benefit of the members.
Mm-hmm. So it's basically, you move in, you immediately become part of that business, a shareholder, if you will, and those shareholders, like any other corporation, can run for office, become a member of that board of directors, and then they're in charge of running that business. So a lot of times these people don't realize they are lay people, so to speak, as far as running that business when they get there, and they're guided by professionals like the manager, the attorneys, and the vendors that operate and service that community.
That's right. The board of directors has that obligation to make the business decisions on behalf of the corporation, and they frequently need assistance from the management company or the manager who carries out the decisions that are made. And the board also will need, in many cases, the advice of other vendors, their lawyers, their accountants, engineers, in some cases construction specialists. But ultimately, it's the board who has to make the decisions regarding common area maintenance or re-roofing or whatever the issue might be.
Based on the input that they get from those professionals.
Yes, that's right. And yes, and as you say, the buyer into the common interest development becomes a member of the association, which is a corporation, and has to kind of quickly learn that this is how the business is conducted. They have a voice. They certainly attend board meetings and express their views about things, but they have to understand that it's the board that has the duty, and not just the authority, but the duty to make decisions for the corporation.
Well, as a manager and the president of my own homeowners association, I'm aware that the homeowners do have a voice. And in this particular instance, I think that we need to start in a very rudimentary way and realize that a lot of times when you buy a home in a common interest development or anywhere, but for this case, in a common interest development, the whole escrow process is a little overwhelming with paperwork and everything else, but people need to realize that one of the many voluminous documents that they sign is that of an agreement that they have read and will abide by the governing documents, which constitute, in this case, CC&Rs, bylaws, and articles of incorporation, if not a condominium plan as well. These CC&Rs and bylaws outline the way in which these corporations and communities operate.
That's right. Right. We always think of the CC&Rs, but as you point out, the bylaws are important too. When you're buying into a common interest development, you want to look at not just the CC&Rs, but also the bylaws. How many board members are there? What are their terms of office? How often does the board meet? Where do they meet? Things like that, that a member wants to have knowledge of.
So in this case, all of those things are and should be outlined in advance of somebody actually making that purchase so they can know what they're getting into, so to speak?
Ideally, they should. We often hear that, oh, I didn't get those bylaws, or I didn't get those rules and regulations, and it's unfortunate when that happens, but the fact still remains that once you purchase, you are subject to those documents. So you want to make every effort before you complete escrow and close escrow to get a hold of the governing documents and read them.
And read them. I think that's the key part. Okay, so we know that once you get in there and you become a member of that corporation and you are a shareholder, and at your annual meetings you're electing your constituents, your neighbors, if you will, to help run that corporation, and maybe someday you choose to run for office in that association yourself. Once you get on that board, you're in charge of it. You have a role in running that corporation. What is your fiduciary role then, once you take that on?
Well, you put it correctly. It's a fiduciary duty, is what we call it in the law. And a fiduciary duty means that you have a high degree of trust. The members are putting a high degree of trust in you to handle their property, their money, for their benefit. And it means that you put their interests before any interests of your own. That goes along with the Corporations Code section, which sets out how a director is to conduct him or herself in office. And that is, the director has to make decisions that are in good faith, meaning there's no ulterior motive in the decision being made. It's for the good of the corporation. It has to be what the director believes is in the best interests of the corporation, and it should be made after a reasonable inquiry, meaning if you don't know all about asphalting streets, you need to consult with someone who does before making that decision. And it goes on to say then, if the director acts under these standards, the director will not have individual liability for any losses to the corporation that might result from that decision. Which
is why we carry the different levels of insurance that we do, not well, including directors and officers. But that is, again, part of running that and having your fiduciary duty is to defer to these experts in these different fields to make sure that you are making the correct decisions fiduciarily to best operate the corporation in the best interests of those members.
That's correct.
Okay, this is fascinating. We're going to talk a little bit more about the role of the Board of Directors in a common interest development when we come back on the CAI Report. Stay with us.
CAI Report is brought to you by Bright & Clean Windows. Trust Southern California's favorite window cleaning company to provide consistent, quality window cleaning service to your home and office. Let Bright & Clean Windows make you look great by removing hard water stains from windows and shower door enclosures and by cleaning windows and mirrors to a gleaming shine. Call 346-9274.
Are you getting the most out of your banking relationship? At Community Association Bank, we exclusively serve community associations and professional management companies, saving you time by handling your banking transactions at your office. Community Association Bank. One bank, multiple options, maximum returns.
This is Mary Howell with the law firm of Epstein, Grinnell & Howell. With 3 Southern California locations and 20 attorneys, we offer prompt legal advice to homeowners associations. We can help you build a better neighborhood. Give us a call.
Epstein, Grinnell & Howell, helping you survive a legal sea of change.
Hey Tim, what's this I hear about your sponsorship with CAI doing so well?
My sponsorship in the television show?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, it's one of the best things I've done for the CAI, besides being a volunteer, that is.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So is it helping you?
Well, it's helping me and it's helping my bottom line. I'm getting customers and making money.
What a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And you can have that opportunity too. Give a call to the CAI office so you can be a sponsor on our CAI report. The telephone number is 760-341-0559.
And we're back on the CAI Report, Mike Livingston and you. Today we are talking with Jen Wangler of the firm of Fiore, Racobs & Powers, one of the local Valley law firms specializing in common interest development law. Perhaps you've seen her on our show before, or you read her column in the local Desert Sun newspaper. She's well regarded here in the Valley and up and down the coast here as a specialist in the field of common interest developments. And Jen, thanks for joining us again today.
Most welcome.
We are talking about the role of the Board of Directors in a common interest development, and it's a very specialized topic inasmuch as the board of directors that are elected by their peers in a common interest development are thrust into, if you will, a very unique position as far as running that corporation, aren't they?
They certainly are, and a lot of times I've found that once a person I have known as a member of an association who has a lot of input and a lot of opinions and thinks he has all the answers, gets on that board of directors, oftentimes they realize that it's different being really on the board and responsible for making decisions. So you undertake that fiduciary duty that we've discussed earlier.
You know, Jen, being a manager myself for as many years as I have now, and also wearing a second hat and being the president of my board as I have now for 6 years, I've watched a lot of people get on the board with me and say exactly that same thing. Boy, there's more to this than I thought. And with that comes a lot of responsibility, and I think it can be a little overwhelming. It's very easy to be a backseat driver, if you will, and sit in the audience and see the outcome or the product of a board decision and think, oh, gee, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why did you do that? Why did you take that tree out? Or why did you paint the building that color? Or why did we get that type of insurance? Why did we spend this much money? There is a lot more that goes into the operation of a common interest development, a planned unit development, a condominium complex, and all of the complexities that come along with it, and the decision-making processes that get to the point of implementing that decision than I think a lot of the general public realizes.
That's certainly true. There's a lot of information that a board receives, or at least should receive, as background information before they come to the meeting and discuss all of it. The purpose of the open meetings that boards do have, that members can attend and listen to the deliberations, is so that the members can observe the board taking its action, discussing matters, but the members also have to realize that even before coming to that meeting, the board members have done a lot of their own reading and research in order to be prepared to ask the right questions and have a discussion at the meeting. And so, as you say, once you get on the board, you find out, wow, this is a lot of work, and they put a lot of time in. Mm-hmm. And as they facetiously say, for such a high salary.
Right.
Of course, they're not salaried.
Right.
It's a volunteer position.
I can assure you of that.
Right,
Yeah.
they're absolutely not paid. So, it's quite a contribution that the directors make to their property.
I think, like any student or anything else, a lot of homework is done before you actually get there to take that test, whether it's to be out on the property meeting with that asphalt contractor to understand what the process is before they lay that asphalt, or meeting with a roofing contractor to visualize and see what the process is there. There's a lot more that goes into being a board member than just showing up at the meeting and listen to the input from the homeowners and reading what's in front of you.
That's right.
And relative to that, tell me a little bit about what you feel about the business judgment rule when it comes to being a board member and expending funds and things like that for the projects necessary to maintain that property.
Sure. Well, as we've already discussed, there's some standards that directors need to follow when they make decisions. That it's in good faith and the director's honest belief that it's in the best interests of the association, and that he's consulted with the experts to the extent necessary. Once the board has done that and made its decision, each director is going to want to make sure that the minutes of the meeting where this decision was made reflect the fact that they did in fact make the decision, that it reflects what the decision was, what the vote was of each director. Generally, you want to, especially with a more controversial issue, each director might want to have his yes or no vote reflected. And then a few of the reasons reports relied on, the reasons for that decision. That way, when you find out that asphalt contractor didn't know what he was doing and you got a bad street job, the minutes are going to reflect that the damage that the association suffered is not should not be put off on the directors who hired that asphalt contractor, because the board did their due diligence in hiring the contractor, got references and all those things, but sometimes things just go sideways And
Right.
That's the reason you want to make sure your minutes document how you made a decision.
Right, right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the board meetings themselves and the input that you often get from homeowners relative to their thoughts and feelings and aspirations for how things should be done, and the board responsibility for common area maintenance and things like that. Oftentimes, what I've found, especially sitting on both sides of the table, as a manager, you don't personalize things. Usually as a board member, a lot of times, because it's your own community, as I've come to find out, you take it a little bit differently. And you accept input from homeowners, but you also realize homeowners, because it's their community, think oftentimes they have a little bit more input on the decisions that are to be made than they actually do. When it really comes down to the decision-making process, they need to realize that the board of directors that they actually hired to make those decisions, sometimes very personal or personal to that particular homeowner, or tough decisions, don't they?
They certainly do. It's a corporation. It's not a democracy, and that's what the members do: is elect the board of directors to make those decisions. Now, the other authority or power that the members have is to unelect or remove that board of directors if the members feel very strongly that they're not making the right decisions. But until there's a removal or a new board is elected at the next annual meeting, it's that group of 5 or 7 people that are making the decisions for the members.
Mm-hmm. So things like, well, you can't take out that tree, that's my tree. I've looked at that tree for 8 years.
Mm-hmm. That's a tough one, but it could be that that tree, an arborist has advised the board that that tree is badly diseased. Eucalyptus trees, I think we know, can lose large branches and pose a safety hazard. The board needs to decide to get that tree out as much as it hurts.
Oh, sure.
The neighbor. But
some of the other things that come up, for example, let's say other issues that come up relative to things that oftentimes people feel they should have more input on. One of the things I hear quite a bit is they feel that votes should be taken by the membership on certain things rather than the board implementing a decision that is really a decision. One that comes to mind is earthquake insurance, for example.
right.
Do you hear that one a lot?
Yes, especially just in the last few weeks, actually, when apparently the earthquake premiums are going up and fewer companies are even selling earthquake insurance. Boards are concerned about spending the money, but they're also concerned about not having that earthquake coverage.
Right, that's a rub, yeah.
It's a very difficult decision if the premiums are going so high that maybe they can't even afford it. It's a board decision, however, to buy that insurance or not to buy that insurance, just as any other business decision is. If a board wants input from the members, the best way to do that is to propose an assessment increase or a special assessment to pay for that earthquake insurance. That's the proper way to get member input. If the members don't want to vote in favor of the assessment increase and it's put out to a vote, then the board needs to follow that determination. Short of that, though, it's the board that needs to make the decision.
So it should be the vote on the special assessment, not on whether to carry earthquake
Whether to
insurance
get
or
it.
not. So in some ways it's semantical, but in general it's more based on the fact of whether we can afford it, not on whether we want to carry the insurance or not.
Right, and for the board of directors, those individuals, it's going to come back on them if there is a big earthquake and they've made a decision not to buy earthquake insurance. They want to document why they didn't purchase the insurance, but it's better to make every effort to be able to pay for it, get a special assessment, increase your budget next year to pay for it.
More on this and some other topics when we come back on the CAI Report.
CAI Report is brought to you by Bright and Clean Windows. Trust Southern California's favorite window cleaning company to provide consistent, quality window cleaning service to your home and office. Let Bright and Clean Windows make you look great by removing hard water stains from windows and shower door enclosures and by cleaning windows and mirrors to a gleaming shine. Call 346-9274.
Hey Tim, what's this I hear about your sponsorship with CAI doing so well?
My sponsorship in the television show?
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, it's one of the best things I've done for the CAI, besides being a volunteer, that is.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So is it helping you?
Well, it's helping me and it's helping my bottom line. I'm getting customers, I'm making money.
What a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And you can have that opportunity too. Give a call to the CAI office so you can be a sponsor on our CAI report. The telephone number is 760-341-0559.
Communication is the key to successful homeowner association management. BestHOA.com specializes in creating websites that serve as the ultimate in communication tools. Taking advantage of technology to help association managers and board members efficiently and promptly deliver information is what BestHOA.com does best. Call BestHOA.com.
And we're back on the CAI Report. Mike Livingston, Jen Wangler with the firm of Fiore, Racobs & Powers, and we have been talking today about the role of the Board of Directors in a common interest development. And Jen, at the break, we talked a little bit about the difference between the obligation of the Board of Directors and the decisions that they make and implement, and the role of the implementation or the wishes and desires of the members themselves and what they can actually have an input on. And there is a little bit of a difference there, isn't there?
There sure is. There are certain things, though, that the members do need to vote on, or that are authorized to vote on. One is, of course, electing the Board of Directors and even calling a meeting to remove a Board of Directors. The members' vote is also required for increases in assessments. More than 20% over last year's assessment requires the vote of the owners, as does a special assessment of over 5% of the budget. And then to amend the governing documents. If you want a board proposes to amend the CC&Rs or the bylaws, that also requires a vote of the members. So they do have, for these fundamental issues of the governing documents, and when you're going to raise assessments over a certain amount, those do go to the members. So, and those are important issues that they control.
So basically, the way in which the corporation runs or is going to be run fundamentally in the future, the members would have an input or a vote on that. However, once they set the policy and elect the Board of Directors, they are going to run the day-to-day operations.
That's right. The board will make decisions on then implementing any amendments to the CC&Rs, for example. That'll indicate how the association is going to be operated in some, whatever the amendment involved, some change in the use restrictions or parking restrictions or whatever it might be. It'll be then the board's obligation to enforce those CC&Rs as amended.
Okay, well, we have just a couple of minutes left on the program, and I know we could go hours on this. Let's talk a little bit about the difference in, and there is some misconception about this, the difference in meetings, open meetings versus executive session meetings, because I think this is something, at least in my tenure as a manager and a board member, that is often misconstrued.
Sure, and we get a lot of questions on that issue. Generally, all meetings of the board are supposed to be open to the members, meaning the members can attend and listen to the discussions and the motions and the actions that are taken by the board. The members cannot participate in the discussions or certainly in the motions, but they can be present. The open meeting law under the Davis-Sterling Act also does require that the board set aside time during its meeting for the members to have input and address the board. But that's the only time that the members are allowed to participate and give input to the board during that board meeting. Some board meetings, though, may be and should be held in executive or closed session, meaning that only the board members are present and others such as management who are within the privilege and assist the board in making these sensitive decisions. The board is limited in the kinds of matters that are suitable or acceptable for executive session. And those include litigation that the association is involved in or may become involved in, member discipline, personnel matters, entering into contracts, and also a couple of other reasons where there's a hearing, a violation hearing. Everything else needs to be discussed and voted on at an open meeting in front of the members.
And in that executive session, I know we do have just a minute left here, there is a duty of the board members to keep that information confidential, which is another thing that arises every once in a while also.
It's very important, especially with things like litigation, the decisions have to be made concerning strategies that might be followed. The board might discuss weaknesses in an association's case, and those kinds of discussions have to remain confidential. If those were to get out, that it would obviously could harm the association. So it's really important that all directors realize the duty to maintain the confidentiality of those discussions, and that they could have individual liability for any harm that's caused to the association by their failure to do so.
For obvious reasons. Okay, again, we could talk on this all day. John Wangler with the firm of Fiore, Racobs & Powers. I'm Mike Livingston for the CAI Report. Tune us in next time. Thanks for joining us.